So we have our final 2021 information in. Generally speaking, we saw donor count up. That should be donor count was down in December 16%, but average gift was up 28%. So overall revenue up 7%. So still a good December. Good to see things going up. For the rest of the year, we saw a 17% year-over-year increase in donations, a 2% increase in average gift, for a total revenue increase of 19% year-over-year. Excited to see that type of growth. Any questions on any of that? Okay, so on to flocks. Flocks are the Federated learning of cohorts, and I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what the L stand. Sorry, Federated. I'm trying to find. Well, we don't necessarily have to know the abbreviation anymore, but because it's going away. But it's the Federated learning of cohorts, and the idea was, and this is from a presentation that we did back in May. I'm sure you've all committed our cookieless marketing webinar from May to memory, but just in case. Google solved for a cookieless environment going across all of these, trying to get cookies that go across websites in a cookieless environment was to have individual identifiers that brought people in and clustered them by unique identifiers and common interests. It's using a web browsing history rather than a piece of code. And the idea would be that it would allow for interest-based targeting that isn't specific to any particular behavior, but you could see, okay, there's this cluster that has these ideas. Well, the reason I'm not going into a whole lot of detail about that is the week before last, Google announced that it is going to be replacing the Federated Learning of Cohorts proposal and going to a topics API. So what does that mean? First, it means that time's running out on Google. They have said they are going to take third-party cookies out of their browsing by 2023. They've already moved the time deadline on that. I can't remember if it's once or twice, but they have moved the deadline on that. And so they're still trying to figure out how can they look at people's browsing history across sessions without this environment. And so time was running out. Few other organizations were joining the flock. There were a lot of puns going on with the name. No one is flying to join. Google's flock is one of the safer versions for work. So on to topics. So what they're thinking with topics is instead of all of these cookies that are on the machine, they would aggregate behavior in 3-week periods. You would get an interest assigned to you. And so not I'm interested in autos and vehicles forever and ever and ever, but rather I'm interested in it for these 3 weeks. And for the for-profit side of things, that probably makes a lot of sense. You know, if you're interested in buying a car, you may be interested in autos and vehicles for that 3-week period and getting those advertisements, but not be interested in it until that car breaks down again. For me, I'm still driving a 2004 Saturn Vue. So yeah, hopefully it will be another few years until I'm interested. I'm driving that one until the wheels fall off. But when I'm interested, I'm going to be interested for a short period of time and not at all thereafter. So this, for the nonprofit side of things, this leads to time-bound marketing. So there's going to be this increased focus on what's happened in the past 3 weeks, but they're not going to be able to focus on everything before that. If you were interested in cancer diagnosis and looking for a lot of information about that at the time of the diagnosis, that's going to be relevant for a short period of time, according to Google, even if it's something that you live with for years thereafter. And so there's going to be this very limited time in which we can capture attention. It's going to be very useful for organizations that work on disaster relief, for example, because there will be a lot of people searching for that sort of thing all at once. And we know that the half-life of that is short. And so I would say this is a good when solution rather than a good who solution. It's not really capturing a donor identity, which is something that we want to do. And so this is one more reason to try to get people to grant permission opt into your newsletters, have ways of communicating with them so that you can get that first party data, so that you can append third party data, and so you can bring people out of the Google kind of walled garden. Any questions? Okay, then on to an interesting study about success breeding success. I'm guessing a lot of you are familiar with the goal proximity research that says that the closer that you are to a goal, the more likely you are to get donations. There's kind of a magic period, as you can see on the right, where someone, if you're at 85% of the way to goal, donations come in twice as fast. And looking at microloans on the left, the more progress that you've made, the more progress that you're going to make. People want to be a part of a winning team. And so the question that these researchers was, that's how you end. How do you begin? And so the study methodology is kind of fascinating. They went in and randomly made initial crowdfunding donations, put additional initial reviews on media, positive awards on Wikipedia, and they signed random petitions and said, does that initial bump, right when someone comes in, make it more likely that the campaign overall will be successful? And in fact, it was most successful in donations. So looking at crowdfunding donations, you can see that the success rate is, let's say 38% thereabouts in the control. But if you have one small initial donation, you're up in the 70% range. Same with ratings, same with awards, same with the signatures, all of which are statistically significant. And so having an initial gift coming in on a campaign is vitally important. And so you'll talk with major donor people and they say, well, we'll raise half of the funding of a capital campaign because before we ever launch it to the public, because we want that feeling of success. It's that, but on a smaller level. Having even that initial donation to a campaign that you're running, have that first name on the Girl Scout cookie sheet or on the project that you're funding on your website can be vitally important. So I would say don't launch until you have a couple of people lined up to make those critical initial gifts. Any questions on that before we go into nudges? Looking at nudges, there's some belief and some literature that says that nudging people to greater gift levels or those sorts of things crowds out giving over time. And so from the blood donation, it's most established in the blood donation world, where if you pay someone for their blood donation, they're less likely to do it altruistically going forward. They're think of it kind of like the people who donate just to get the premiums, for example, on our side of things. There's also some evidence that if you have volunteers going door to door to fundraise and you start paying them in a nominal sum, they'll do less face-to-face fundraising because you're crowding out some of that altruistic reason for giving of time and effort. So let's test this with donations. And so what they did is they gave people some details about UNICEF. Here are the reasons you might want to donate. Asked people if they wanted to donate to UNICEF. And then they asked, did you feel manipulated by the efforts? And they looked at 7 different conditions. The control condition is no nudge. Do you want to donate to UNICEF? And then they had default change. So we're just going to change it so that you're automatically opted in rather than automatically opted out. There's the social norm judge, the moral judge, and then there's the increased or decreased transparency. So what those are is, for increased transparency, they put this long language afterwards to say, we're doing this. We're talking about, we're highlighting opting in versus opting out. We're talking about social norms. We're talking about the moral reasons for this because it's been shown to increase donations. It's really letting people peek behind the curtain to see, is this a nudge or not? Social norms is saying previous studies have shown that about 80% of people choose to donate money. So you're using that positive social pressure to get them to donate. And then the moral question is, what do you think is the most morally right thing to do in this situation? So those are the condition nudges that we're going through. And the results, the proportion of people who donated increased in every scenario. the average donation given by the overall revenue per person increased in every scenario. Interestingly enough, the default nudge, making it out versus opt-in, was the most effective. And they asked people, did you feel manipulated? And that was the least time that people felt manipulated. And in fact, explaining that, adding the information to say, we are intentionally manipulating you, adding that information didn't do too much to people feeling manipulated or not. And so you can see also the average donation among donors, the average gift is what we would call it, generally stayed the same or went up. And so you have an increase in the proportion donating, increase in the overall average gift. So good news all the way across. Some nice graphs on this. You can see the proportion donating, the jump up in the default nudge without transparency as the most effective, but really anything was better than doing nothing. Transparency didn't change things too much. And then the interesting part of this is if you look at when the nudge was perceived as a manipulation attempt, the proportion donating was generally around the baseline. So the increase was among people who didn't feel like they were being manipulated. They were responsible for all of the growth in all of the scenarios by and large. And so the extent to which you can kind of keep your grubby nudging fingerprints off of things, the better off, the more effective that nudge is going to be. And you can see among donors, the fact that people thought they were being manipulated in a lot of these cases didn't affect how happy they were with the donations. Generally speaking, right around the control level and not a lot of variation there. So people, by even showing we're nudging you, we're manipulating you, people were still very happy with their donations, which is a good thing. So interesting study there. Into our ever popular potpourri section, looking at, since we're time here for the Winter Olympics, I wanted to bring up a sport that was a Winter Olympic exhibition sport in 1928. And it is called ski jarring. And the idea is you go through a course of jumps and rings and gates, and it's one person riding on a horse and at about 40 miles an hour, and the other person behind them on skis holding onto a rope. And I feel like we are really missing out by not seeing this in the Winter Olympics. You may say horse riding and skiing is a random combination, but please remember that the modern pentathlon in the Olympics is, and I am not joking about this, the 5 events are fencing, freestyle swimming, equestrian show jumping, and a combination event of pistol shooting and cross-country running that they refer to as the laser run because they now use lasers as the pistols there. So ski jarring, very interesting sport, and one that I hope comes to the Olympics for its 100th year in 2028 or thereafter. I guess thereafter now that I'm thinking about it. We've all sent out that email that we regret and wasn't supposed to go out. The Missouri State Highway Patrol sent out an emergency alert to basically the state of Missouri, looking for a purple-green 1978 Dodge coming out of Gotham City. For those who are thinking about a purple-green Dodge, that's what it looks like. It's the Joker mobile from the 1989 Batman movie. And so, yes, they were chasing allegedly the Joker mobile through the state of Missouri. No notice on whether the Batmobile actually lost its wheel. So hopefully this makes you feel better about those times like I've done, where you forget to replace the subhead of your email and things go out to other folks. I didn't think this would be a recurring story coming up, but you may remember in December, we talked a little bit about Peloton killing a major character on the Sex and the City reboot. But apparently we are on the people getting heart attacks on Peloton on premium cable channels beat, because in the show Billions, Axe Capital COO Michael Wagner was trying to keep up with his younger girlfriend in a Peloton class. He suffered a heart attack. He went to the hospital and said, I'm not, those were in production at the same time, so they didn't know about it, but they dubbed in the line, I'm not going out like Mr. Big in post-production, to refer to the Sex and City reboot. Peloton, I feel sorry for their social media folks because they were not amused. The first one, they had a very clever ad that came out thereafter. This time they were much more along the lines of, they didn't ask permission, cut it out, please stop having people have heart attacks on Pelotons. So yes, spoiler alert, my apologies on that. I did, in December, I revealed I tried to talk around Mr. Big, but hopefully those have seen it by now. Some upcoming education that we have going on. The big thing that I would say here is that we have a webinar coming up on the 16th with our friends from First Degree, talking about the rise of social influencers and how nonprofits can take advantage of social influencers in their marketing. They have a new product called Givefluential, but that, yes, they will mention and talk about, but it's also generally talking about the power of influencers and how for-profits are using that, and some case studies on how nonprofits have used that in the past. So that's on the 16th. And you can sign up by going to the We Are More page and going to education webinars.